Any objective observer who cares about this country, its security, its future, said pass the bill. But not our Republican colleagues. Not our Republican colleagues. They're all voting no even on the motion to proceed. They don't even want to debate border. They don't even want to debate Ukraine and aid to Israel and humanitarian aid to the Palestinians.
That is Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, who said that, he wanted to be honest, he wanted Ukraine and Israel aid just passed. And the Republicans said, no, wait a second. We got to take care of our border first. So they worked on a bipartisan border bill that doesn't have the votes of about 25 to 30 Republicans. So they don't want to move forward with it. Chuck Schumer's frustrated by it, but you can't sincerely think that he wants to get the border fixed. If he wasn't actually wedged into that corner, he would have acknowledged it, which is sinful because he is a New Yorker. He sees what's happening in New York. 60 to 70,000 people just on our streets, cops getting beat up. You see the anti-Semitic behavior in the streets, not a word from him, maybe one letter that came out. The most powerful Jewish leader in the country. Martha MacCallum is here. Martha, there's a lot of action in Washington. First on this border bill is pretty much dead, right?
It is. Well, Kristen Sinema was just on. Great interview with Bill Hemmer and Dana Perino. And she is clearly massively disappointed in her colleagues. And she's from Arizona. She wants to see some action. She feels like it's all become too political. She pointed out a number of ways that she thinks that her bill is more strenuous than H.R. 2. She's like, if you're really concerned about doing something effective on the border, she believes this bill should be pushed through. It's not going to happen. But, for Chuck Schumer also, it's like, Democrats can find cover in this bill, right? They can find the ability to say, look, I did something on the border, because when he turns around and goes back to New York and wants to run again, if he does, people are going to be concerned about what's going on, immigration.
We are now, everywhere you go.
Absolutely. So, I think it's a bad situation for Republicans. And, Johnson had two bills go down yesterday, independent aid for Israel and this border bill. And I think I think people are so sick and tired of seeing nothing get done. The president doesn't get anything done. Kristen Sinema claims that in this bill, there's enforcement that's incumbent on the president as part of this bill to carry out the efforts to, change asylum laws, to carry out the efforts to turn people back, detention for 90 days. If you don't meet the asylum measures, benchmarks, then you're sent back. She said there's money in this bill to fly people back to Mexico, to fly them back to their home countries, because the law insists that we do something in that regard. So, I think it's disappointing, and it's really embarrassing because Republicans forced this. We're not going to, as you said, they're not going to send money to Ukraine or Israel unless our own border's secure. And now they get the bill and they go, oh yeah, never mind, we don't want to do that either.
So what happens to that aid? Do you just let the Russians take Ukraine and just let Israel end their operations in Gaza?
Good question.
So you can't have it both ways. So. The other thing is you've allowed, at least temporarily, Joe Biden to make statements like to saying that the Republicans now own the border problem, which is comical.
Yeah.
1 million people have come here illegally since October 1st. That's a new all-time record.
It's clear the president has no interest in pulling the levers that are at his hand. It's unbelievable, and I think it's going to be hugely problematic for him come election time. But the question is, if conservatives who are very rightfully outraged at what's happening at the border and who talk about the number of people who've crossed the border on the terror watch list, right, are not willing to do anything to get some measures to turn people back, then maybe they're not that worried about the people crossing on the terror watch list. Are they? What do you think, Brian?
What I think is this. Senator Langford kept me informed and other people informed along the way what he was trying to do. He says that Chuck Schumer was not involved almost at all. He said he played a role there. He said the White House was working against him almost every step of the way. Murphy came aboard, and Sinema was an honest broker. They felt as though they all got mostly what Republicans felt like they got a lot what they wanted. What they are I think it's also noteworthy to say that the Border Patrol Union wants
Correct.
this, who is voting for Trump again and voting for the first two times.
And they're dealing with it every day. And what they see is that the situation, if this bill were to go through, as I've been told and understand it, these lines of single men standing there and getting passes into the country would end. Okay.
Right.
So if you're horrified by that, the women and children would
They'd be
handled
turned around
differently.
right there.
They would be turned around and sent back. They would be deported. So, if you're happy with them just being able to come into the country under the current system, then fine, vote this down. But I think people are so tired of seeing no action and no change. And it was a negotiation. So obviously you're not going to get every single thing that you want.
Right.
But I think Congress doesn't function. And I think, people, we're just all about elections and not governing, apparently.
So
and everyone seems to be okay with that or
Right.
want that.
Here's what Chip Roy said, cut 7.
I saw former President Trump make that allegation earlier today on one of his social media posts. All the president has to do is declare the border is closed and it's closed. Well, with all due respect, that didn't happen in 2017, 18, 19, and 20. There were millions of people who came into the United States during those 4 years. But what did happen was that administration, led by the president, led by people who believe in America, led by strong leaders at DHS, they worked to secure the border. They worked to get those numbers down.
But you needed cooperation to change a lot of the rules. The Remain in Mexico, which people were suing about.
You need cooperation
the wall
from
that
Mexico.
They kept stopping building the wall. They had to go repurpose defense money, got sued for that.
Yep.
The sanctuary cities tried to get rid of that, got sued for that,
Yep.
lost in the courts.
$650 million in this bill to finish the
50
wall.
miles.
Find 50 miles that are so important. I'm just watching some video as you're talking of women and children coming through the open areas. The cartels slice down the wall. They take out, whatever kind of power tool they use. They slice down sections of the wall and let people run through it. One of the things that is concerning in this bill is the inclination for single men to grab a child, grab a woman in order to come in and claim that they're a family. But at least some of this causes a pause in people's thinking, right? Right now, just run around the side, go through the cut through, pay the cartel $5,000, put more money in their pocket for fentanyl, and head on through.
And you got these the DNA kits were going to be pushed to the border again. And a lot of times with the DNA kits, all you have to do is hold the swab.
Right.
As soon as you do that, you go, by the way, if this is not your kid, you're under arrest. They go, okay, it's not my kid.
Exactly.
So
and it changes the mindset about whether or not it makes sense to try to come.
So there was an impeachment vote yesterday, and evidently Congressman Green showed up in a wheelchair or something, and he unbalanced the vote. So it was going to be a tie. So they made it a law so they could redo the vote again today. But why not just wait a week, as the former speaker wrote me this morning, and I said, would you have done this? And he said to me, I would have waited a week because Steve Scalise is back next week. Why don't you just wait a week? So I don't know why Gallagher's not voting for it. I mean, McClintock's not voting for it. And here's what he said, cut 13.
In this fantasy that somehow an impeachment, if it passes the House, is going to result in the Senate removing Mayorkas with a 2/3 vote, I sincerely doubt that's going to happen. But more to the point, even if it did, it's not going to change anything. Simply swapping one left-wing official for another is not going to change these policies at all.
So that's why he just said, I'm out. He says, I think it's a bad precedent. Gallagher wrote a column in the Wall Street Journal today saying it's just a bad precedent. When you don't like what somebody's doing, let's say you didn't like what Barr's doing or William Barr, they hated him. Let's say you didn't like Mattis or something that he was doing in the previous administration. Let's go impeach. I'm not saying he's going to get 60 votes to do it, but what a distraction of 2 or 3 days of debating this 2 or 3 weeks debating this.
Well, it's kind of shocking that President Biden, he who has admitted now that he thinks the border is a crisis, hasn't removed him himself. Is there any accountability for the people in his cabinet who aren't doing their job?
Like the Secretary of Defense?
But you know what? I understand where Mike Gallagher is coming from on this. They know that means that then they'll turn around and have a Democrat majority pushing to remove members of a Republican president's cabinet, because we see where that goes. Impeachment becomes the tool of every party against the president of the opposite party. It's problematic. What's really sad is that there's no accountability at the White House for the people who aren't doing their job. They should be fired. He should be fired. It's an absolute. He should resign. I mean, if things were as bad as they are and you were doing this job, you have to either have enough integrity to say, I'm going to step aside. Somebody maybe can do a better job than me. You know, that kind of sentiment seems to be gone from society.
Mayorkas has repeatedly lied to Congress, but he's just doing the things that the president wants him to do. The president wouldn't say that the border. Remember, the former president used to go crazy. He's like, he is just destroying Nielsen. He's destroying this. He's killing his own cabinet members for saying things were down. And we've thought, well, that's an interesting management strategy.
Exactly.
But it's almost as if to say, see, if you say, well, the border wasn't better or wasn't, well, nobody doubts that he didn't do everything possible to fix that border. People being fired, separation of families, because, listen, they looked at it as a DWI, that if you're driving drunk and you have a kid in the back, guess what? I'm taking your kid and you're going to jail. Right. They tried to do that philosophy. Yeah, so you might not like it, but you can't say, well, that Donald Trump didn't really try.
And you can't say that it hasn't happened under prior administrations. And people need to understand that that's a possibility when they cross the border, that they might be separated under that rule, but it's not in place anymore.